And tonight we are welcoming back half. I thought it might be the dynamic duo, but it's half of the dynamic duo of My Divorce Solution. So Catherine's going to be on, and we are going to be talking about conquering financial fears. We were, especially during divorce. There she is. Okay, Catherine, I see you. Let me get you on here. We're like spooky financial myths versus facts, but we couldn't be creative in time. So
Okay,
there you are, Catherine. Good to see you, and I can see you. It's
Yay.
working.
Yay!
All right. So welcome back. And before we even get started, why don't you first introduce yourself and say a little bit about what you do?
Okay, great. Thanks. So I'm Catherine Shanahan. I am the co-founder of My Divorce Solution. I am our divorce financial specialist, and our specialists are CDFA trained and mediation trained, with over 5 years of experience in the finance world. I've been in finance since 1988, I guess. My gosh, really dating myself here.
Wow.
So we work with a lot of couples and individuals going through the divorce process, getting them financially prepared, and helping them make this a streamlined process.
Yeah. So you know that our community are people dealing with high conflict divorce, so these long dragged out cases, and a lot of times they have to deal with abuse of discovery. So their ex doesn't show where the money is, and they don't know their rights. And of course, the number one adjective we hear is, "I'm so overwhelmed.
Yeah.
I can't deal with this." So I thought that we could talk about things that are justified fears and things that are unjustified. So I'm thinking about myself when I was in a 20-year relationship with my ex and married for 18. And first of all, I never thought we'd get divorced. But secondly, he owned a number of rental properties that he always kept separate and hidden, but it turns out they weren't because our taxes were done together and all kinds of nonsense. But the big fear that I had was I can't afford a divorce. I can't afford like $10,000 and it costs 10 times that. But what do you think when people say I cannot afford to leave? Is that something that is a true fact for many, or is that a myth?
Well, it could be a fact, but it's mostly a myth.
Okay,
And the question
tell us
the question is, can you afford to stay?
why.
You know, take it from someone who also is married to a narcissist for 23 years, and I'm very comfortable with finances. And as a matter of fact, we didn't have a financial problem because we were both financial people. But this being scared your whole life is so costly to your health and everything else. And I think the first step to gaining some kind of financial independence is start looking at that tax return. You know, you said something really important. You know, maybe he did tell me about it, not really tell me directly, but he told me because it was in our tax return. And maybe it was that you chose not to look at it because you were fearful of it, because it's scary.
Well,
And then when
I thought he would, we're married, we're never getting a divorce. I just assumed he was telling the truth and I didn't bother. He just said, sign this, and I did.
Yeah. But, narcissists will tell the truth that's their truth, which is not necessarily always the truth, right? And so you need to find what you need to know, and not based on what he or she is telling you need to know. And that is data. And we bring it all down to the data, the fine print. So I love when I have a client that comes in and we get their spouse to participate, because I have a lot of training in that area, for one. But two is, I don't have to challenge them with their perspective of what their financial picture looks like, or their perspective of how they live with their spouse. However, I can ask really good questions, and then I ask for the data to support what they are claiming. So you can assert anything you want to me, and that's great. But as a financial professional, I'm asking you for the documentation to support your opinion there. And that is when you see a coercive personality switch a little bit. They get a little bit more nervous in their seat, or they fumble through the papers, or they say, oh, you don't really need to know that. And we can listen to all that, but you can do that too at home. You can say, hey, honey, or a-hole, or whatever you want to say. And you can say, I believe what you're telling me, but so I can start learning, can you give me the documentation that supports that information, just so I can learn for myself? Because
I love that.
You can learn. You're not stupid. And when they say it's over your head or you can't handle it, I promise you, you can handle it. Ask for the documentation to support any information. That's your first step.
Oh, you're bringing me back to the days of early mediation with my ex when it was just the two of us and a mediator. And the mediator said, okay, we're going to deal with custody and we're going to deal with the finances and the assets. So everybody's got to bring in their stuff. And my ex would show up with a blank legal pad every week. And it was like, where's your stuff? And he said, exactly what you said. You already know. You don't need to know. You know what I have. And we couldn't get anywhere because he refused to supply the stuff. And in the meantime, at home, he was saying, well, we don't need to go through lawyers because you already know. And I'm thinking, but I don't really know anything.
Right.
And so I love that you said that question, like, help me learn. I just want to learn. Like, what's wrong with somebody asking to learn? Show me the stuff and watch for their answer.
Well, plus how many of those spouses are saying, I'm going to take care of you. I promise. We've been married for 20, 30 years. Do you think I'm going to let anything happen to you? And so you on the receiver of listening to that is like, oh my gosh, this is where you're so manipulated, where you're like, oh yes, they are going to take care of me. Well, I always say, great. I'm so happy you're taking care of your spouse that you're divorcing. But could we see the documentation to support that, to make sure that that language then carries through to your final agreement? Because you need the agreement to support any follow through. If it's not in writing, those promises will go away.
Yeah, definitely. And the words that we use with our clients are, show me verifiable proof of whatever you're saying. So you're saying, the exact same thing. The other thing I was thinking about was in terms of budgeting. I thought that going from a 2-income household to a 1-income household would be really hard. Like I'd never be able to be financially independent. And then as we were going through the discovery process with the little bits that I was getting, I realized that loads of money was going out the door that I never knew about. And especially in terms of being, in my mind, careless, not paying credit card bills on time. So there was always an interest for balances carrying over when we had the money to pay the balance in full. Late fees with things never getting paid. My ex didn't open the mail. And I would say, why don't you let me handle it? No. I have a system. I'm going to do it. How often do you see things like that with your clients?
Oh gosh, red flag, right? So I didn't know you back then. But that's control, right? So there is so much financial abuse going on. And sadly, it's not talked about because everyone talks about physical and emotional abuse, which are horrendous. And I experienced emotional abuse, but stemming from that is financial abuse. And that is the best way for someone to control another person. So if you feel like what you said in the beginning, I can't afford to get divorced. Well, you probably can afford to get divorced. It's just that the other side makes you believe that you can't. And so when they say, no, you don't need to open that piece of mail, or no, I'm taking care of that, that is a total red flag that you absolutely need to open that piece of mail. You absolutely need to see it. Even if you are not clear on what you're looking at, the mere fact of you saying, I would like to open that mail is going to set your spouse in a whole nother mindset because they're not expecting you to say that. And anger about finances is another sign of being in a financially abusive relationship. So if your spouse grabs the piece of envelope from you and says, no, you're not opening that, you don't need to do that, that is financial abuse, and that should not be tolerated. And so what do you do to stop that? That's the hard thing, right? What do you do to stop that?
Yeah. As long as we're on that topic, could you talk about some other red flags of financial abuse that you see often?
Oh boy. Okay. Yeah, I could go on forever about this. So yes, another one is, a lot of times when people come to get their financial portrait, and this is 20-year marriages, 15 and more, 15, 20, 30-year marriages. And the first thing that particularly a woman will say is, oh my gosh, I'm so embarrassed, but I was educated and I had a great job and a great career going, but then we had children and we came to an agreement where my spouse insisted I didn't work. He did
Mm-hmm.
not want me to work. I was to stay home and raise the kids. And that was so, now that we can fast forward, that was so that he could develop his lifestyle, or she, there are narcissist women out there, but so that they can have their ego, their lifestyle, and everything is being taken care of them because you're making the home and all of that. That is a red flag when somebody tells it you can't work because they're going to take care of you. You can work if you choose to work. And I always say now to my daughter and anybody else of a younger generation, even if you give up working, because that's the agreement the two of you came to, keep up with your licensing. If you're educated in anything, accounting or what have you, take classes all the time. Even when you have kids, you could do online classes now, online schooling. Keep your mind going because somebody that wants to control you wants to control your work environment as well.
Mm-hmm.
If you are working, however, your paychecks are going to an account that you do not have a password to, that you do not have access to, that is a red flag. That is somebody controlling your behavior. So they're saying just deposit your check. We see this a lot with tax return refunds. They get routed to their joint account, but yet one party doesn't have access to that account. That is a red flag. You need
Yeah.
access to that account. You need the password, or you need to set up your own access to that account. And if your name is on it, you could set up your own access. You don't need your spouse's access.
How common is this? Sorry to interrupt the list, but again, I'm getting flashbacks. So, my kids are a little older now, but in the beginning, like I had been teaching high school and then I stopped and then I developed my own businesses and my ex made more money than me for a while and said, how about we do this? I'm going to take a chunk of my paycheck, my significant paycheck, and put it into my retirement. And then we're going to use all the money that you make, Lisa, and that's going to pay the household bills. And we're going to put it into my retirement, but that's going to be both of ours. And then, of course, as soon as we split, he's like, it's all mine because it's my name and it's my retirement account. How often
Guess
do you
what?
see things like that?
Oh, very often. And guess what? It is not his retirement account. It happens to be an account that's in his name, but it's a marital account that is rightfully yours as well. So it wouldn't stay in his account in his name. It would be transferred into, half of it could be transferred into an account in your name. So it doesn't matter if you were the one participating or not. We get that so often. I'll say, well, tell me a little bit about your retirement accounts. Oh my gosh, I don't have any. They're all in my husband's name. Okay, well, those are in his name, but it's a marital asset. And so you need
So
to
that's a
know
myth. So we have a
it's a
myth here.
myth. It's a big, big, big myth. It doesn't have to have your name on it to be considered marital.
Yeah. I think a lot of people think that it does.
Oh, it does,
They
because spouses will say to them, this is another good one, another good myth. My employer will not let you have half of that money because it's in my name and I work for them and you don't work for them.
Ooh, good to
Okay.
know.
Your employer has nothing to do with that. It's called a qualified domestic relations order. If it's an ERISA run plan, their employer will approve a QDRO if the court orders it, and it is a marital asset and it will be divisible to you, even if it's not in your name and you're not the employee.
Interesting. So quadros or qualified domestic relations orders are things that the court issues, but I know in my own situation, you got to watch it because my ex's attorney insisted on preparing the paperwork and didn't do it properly over and over, and I could not get access. I couldn't get the money that I was awarded in a money judgment because the paperwork that wasn't done properly. Who should be preparing the quadro paperwork?
Well, there's QDRO administrators and they're the ones that do it. And it is true, there are a few big companies that do have departments that will do it. However, a lawyer will process it. A lot of lawyers don't like preparing QDROs because they're not trained to do that, but there are QDRO administrators out there who are certified. And it is really important that you talk about that before your divorce is finalized, because you do have to pick options in there. For example, what if you come to this agreement and your spouse, like you're talking about, doesn't even follow through with processing it? Because the employee does have to be the one to submit it to the employer, right? So not only that, but they have prototypes, employers. So you want to make sure that their prototype is being used. And there's things to choose. Like, for example, are you going to get the growth? It could take a year for someone to process a QDRO. You want to make sure you get the market fluctuations. Or most importantly, and this is a big one, what if the spouse who is the employee passes away before the account is QDRO'd? So there's specific language in there that has to be checked off on. And I suggest you have that done before you sign your agreement, because you want to be done with the agreement. Everybody wants to be done. So imagine having to get your spouse to come back in to deal with the
Yeah.
questions.
Okay. Hey, and I'm not sure if it's a little comment I just saw or something made me think of a thing I want to ask if it's a myth or a fact. If your spouse is having an affair and you're still married, no one's filed yet, but they're blowing through assets and spending it on the affair partner, are they allowed to do that, or is that considered marital assets? Because you're like, what happens?
Yeah.
What
So
happens if you haven't officially separated?
yeah.
Are you stuck?
Well, you can be, but listen, I'm not an attorney, so I'm not giving legal advice here. However, when it comes to financial, and we call that dissipation of assets, right? So if every state, and we're in every state, so I can only give a blanket kind of response here, because every state has a different guideline on your date of separation. But if it is clear that your spouse is spending money outside the marriage, you're not going to be able to go down a rabbit hole from 10 years ago, 5 years ago. Sometimes I hear people say, oh, yes, I'm going after that. That is all your emotions coming up. And it ends up you spend 50 grand, 100 grand chasing money. At the end of the day, I hear them say, well, we can't really get that. We're never. So I always like to back up and say, what is it that we're looking at here? Some basic accounting can tell whether or not there has been money that's been dissipated, right? And when we do our portrait, we can see any kind of red flags. And if you actually even would need a forensic, or if you would even just need to do your own little accounting here. And then always keep that in your mind when it comes to your negotiations, right? So you have to just know that maybe you'll get some of that back, but maybe you won't. And it's the same thing with attorney fees. People think that they can call their attorney and rack up $100,000 in attorney fees because they think their spouse is paying for it. But at the end of the day, I rarely see that. And so you have to be aware of this. And that's why it's so important with our process that you know what you have, what's missing, and what's worth fighting for, or what's going down a rabbit hole that you're never going to come out of.
Yeah.
So
we talk about the cost benefit analysis. How much is it going to cost and how much benefit are you actually going to get if you find it?
I like when those spouses are doing stuff outside the marriage. I call that the honeymoon phase of when you're getting divorced, because those are the same aggressive spouses who are saying, I'm going to take care of you. I'm going to make sure you get everything you need. Do you think I would ever hurt you, or what have? So now let's go after that, right? Let's go after those amounts and just ask for it. It really does matter how you start and you move financially through the process. So sometimes, although painful, because a lot of times when you're being cheated on or you're being taken advantage of financially, it takes a long time to just heal from that. And a lot of those people don't really even want to get divorced.
Yeah.
Even though people are telling you that your spouse is an idiot and all of that, it's still your emotions. So it takes you longer. But for me, sometimes I'm like, I know emotionally you need to work with your coach and who you need to work with, but financially, let's act on this. Let's get the documentation that we need. Why your spouse does have some guilt, if they have any guilt.
Yeah, definitely.
Right? The more information you can gather financially, the better off you are. And the more money it's going to be worth for you. So if they are dissipating money, you can ask for it back.
Yeah.
Rather than
Okay,
fight
so
for it.
speaking of that, here's another myth versus fact. You tell me. When somebody has behaved badly in a marriage, we often hear from their spouse or their ex, I hope the judge sees what kind of character that person has and awards me more. Do you think judges award it based on the moral character of the person or based on how well you build your case?
Yeah. I remember, for me, financially, my agreement was okay, but my language in my agreement wasn't written strong enough. And that's where Karen came in. That's why we formed our company. I knew the financial side. I didn't know the document side, right? Karen knew the document side, not the financial side. That's why we formed our company. But I was in the courtroom just 3 years ago, even though I was divorced 12 years ago. And he just did not want to let go. We had one more asset together. And so we ended up in the courtroom, and he was lying. And I had all the data. Now, he forgot what I do for a living, or he was acting like he wasn't aware. I was so prepared. What I didn't even realize, even though I know the industry at that time, I didn't realize our attorney's job to educate the judge. The judge does not want to hear from me.
Right.
They want to hear from the attorney, and it's all this facts, right? So I'm thinking the judge is going to hear my side of the story, and I know it and all of this. And I kept addressing him, and he kept saying, ma'am, you need to speak to your attorney, ask your attorney to ask me. And I'm such a logical thinker. I'm like, why would I ask a third party when I can ask you directly? Well, my
Oh
ex kept,
yeah, that was a
right?
no-no.
That's a no-no. And I kept getting the no-no. And my ex kept saying things like, this is a game to him. He actually wanted an apology from me for leaving him,
Mm-hmm.
right? And at the end of that day, I remember my attorney saying to me, you know what, Catherine, do you really want to come back from South Carolina? Just give him a settlement, just give him some money towards it. And I was crying, saying, are you kidding me? He just admitted in front of the judge that he was making a mockery, basically. This is a game. He wanted an apology. And now you, as my attorney, want me to give him money. I said, no, I will come back from South Carolina. And he said, the judge doesn't want to hear this. The judge doesn't want to hear all of this. He doesn't want to hear about it. And I thought, you know what? But he already heard it. So maybe he doesn't want to hear it, but the judge heard it. And so the judge is a human being. And I wasn't ranting and raving, because if I'm ranting and raving, they don't want to hear it from me. But my ex acting like that. So I came back from South Carolina and I won the whole thing. I didn't owe my ex a penny. He owed me all the money. And I was so ashamed of my attorney actually at that time, because I was like, you wanted me to settle when somebody's lying in there. So I think because I was composed, although I cried, I let his antics play out as I knew they would, because somebody with that kind of personality always shows their true colors. And the judge will see that. So I don't need to tell the judge. The judge sees it for themselves.
Yeah, we like to say that judges need to be able to draw their own conclusions, or else they find it disrespectful.
Yes.
And the other quote that we love is stupid shows up.
Oh, I love that. And you know what? I'm glad you say that, because if you're listening to us right now, because I deal with a lot of high conflict, your kids will see that stupidity as well. I just had a client on crying, and we're talking finances, and she was crying about her daughter's behavior towards her and how nice he was being to the husband. I know we're digressing off finances
That's
right
okay.
now, but his stupidity will show up even when it comes to that. So the more confident you become starts with having financial independence, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent, having financial independence. And then it will bleed into every other aspect of your life. And that's your kids too. And controlling how others treat you. Financial independence to me is probably the best gift my parents ever gave to me, is the value of financial independence. Whether you need to work 3 jobs or you don't have to work any, it doesn't matter. Your financial independence is golden.
Yeah. And I'm glad you mentioned that. I'm thinking about an attorney I interviewed a few months ago named Mia Poppy in New York City. She was saying that a lot of her female clients hate to hear it, but when they're complaining about how all the conflict that still exists between them and their exes post-judgment, she said, you know what you can do to fix this is to become financially independent, and then you don't have to deal with a lot of the stuff. I mean, the custody stuff is one thing, but a lot of the financial issues are what create conflict as well.
Yeah. Or you learn to listen. I'm all about getting the money that's owed to you, right? So, and I'm all about saying, listen, this is what's rightfully yours, but if you don't want it, you don't have to take it. And when somebody's promising something, get it in your agreement. It's your job to enforce that agreement. So if you don't want to enforce a support payment, don't enforce it, but insist on having it in your agreement so that you can fall back on it. You have to be financially protected. I could get sick tomorrow, and not be able to work. So if I'm not financially protected, what good did my stubbornness do? Or just don't choose that battle. Let it arrive when it arrives, open an account, let the money sit there. If you're going to take the attitude of no fighting and you're just going to let it appear, go ahead and then have your agreement to enforce anything that's not happened. But don't base your life on the stress of that. Just deal with what's there and then enforce what you have to enforce if you want to.
Right. So at least don't deny yourself that option.
Yes.
Because I think when people are in the middle of it, we call it being in the muck. When they're still in the middle of all, it's exhausting and you feel like, I just can't wait for this to end. I don't want to deal with this person ever again. And I know for me, it took a year to get that divorce, but then I knew I would have to go back. So it was about 17 months later that I was ready, and my divorce attorney had already instructed me like what I could do myself. And I was glad I had my energy back and had done a bunch of healing. I was like, okay, now I'm ready. And also had a lot of the financial stuff in place, had built a really good record, and was able to go back myself and win and keep winning. But it took years to keep enforcing the orders, because someone on the other side who has a lot of money can continue to play games with the court.
They don't care. That's part of the fun for them, right? They'll use the court as much as they want. And unfortunately, there's a lot of attorneys that will do that also. So if you're not clear on what you have and what you're actually going for, then you're going to be part of that process too. You know, you get to decide what it is that you really need and want, you know, and that's only based on, you said something earlier about going into mediation, and your ex came with a blank piece of paper. Well, it always dumbfounds me that people are forced to go to mediation without having this information, because it's always the one who doesn't have all the know that comes with the most information. They come the most prepared, right?
Yeah.
And so step back a little bit, right? Don't be so forthcoming give your information, but do it in a manner of which is controlled. So you don't need to go to mediation if you don't know what your scenarios are. Why go to mediation? I'm paid to sit through some mediations. I literally sit there, and I'm paid for 10 hours to sit there. And I feel bad for the client sitting there, because half the time you're not doing anything, right? So the other half of the time, know your scenarios. Have the documentation to support that. Otherwise, insist on a different date. Don't go. I wouldn't go. I wouldn't go.
Right. And the other thing too that we see is the person, which is usually our client, shows up with as much information as possible. The other side shows up with little, if anything. And then there's pressure to settle. And we say that often in these situations, when somebody sees that one party won't budge, and that's usually an abusive party, they will pressure the other side to give, because they just want it to finish. So they'll be like, oh, why don't you just take this? So I love how you say, if you don't have the full financial picture, how can you agree to anything? And that's a reasonable request to say, why are we here? If I don't have the information, how can we come to a reasonable settlement? We know the other side's not interested in reasonable, but that is a reasonable question to tell your attorney and to say to a judge, I know we've been ordered into mediation, but if we don't have the information, then what are we doing?
Well, I'm so glad you said that, because you actually just stated a fact. It is so factual that occurs. You go into those meetings and there's no information, and you are going to be the one to be bullied into making a decision, even by your own representation, because everybody's over it. If you think you're over it, your attorneys are over it. The mediator gets over it. Everybody's over it. But guess what? They all go home. You go home with your agreement. And so I always say, stop and take pause. And exactly what you just said. The fact of the matter is, you do not have to agree on that day. And if you do not have the information to agree, and that's not somebody's spreadsheet that they give you, that is a spreadsheet that has documentation to support it. And everyone says, oh, we'll agree on this, but we'll get the documentation later. You're not getting the documentation later. And then you're over.
There's no incentive.
There's no incentive. And that's why I don't like premature negotiations, where you say, okay, I'll keep the house and you get to keep the pension. And then later on, you find out that the pension's worth 4 times the amount that your house actually is worth. Right? Or the house has more issues in it than you ever really realize, and you're stuck with it. You have no cash. You need to know what the impact of all these decisions are before you make them. It's your divorce, and you're entitled to that information. And I can't be more adamant about it, because I'm sitting on the financial side, and our portrait will say, requested this documentation, unavailable to wife, not submitted. So now your mediator or judge or anyone else can see the footnotes and say to the other side, why did you not submit any of this paperwork? It was all requested.
Yep. Yeah, people, I can't tell you how often I hear female clients in particular say, he can have everything, I just want the kids. And we say, don't do that, because you give away all the money and everything else, and then you get the kids, and then they go back for a modification a year and a half later, and then they get the kids too. So what did you do for yourself?
What is that saying? You cut off your nose to spite your face, right? Because I always say, you know what, get your kids and get the money too.
Right.
And at the end of the day, you don't want the money, give it to your kids when they're 21. You know, they'll be thrilled that you hand them over a check if you don't really want to use that money. But get what is rightfully yours
Yeah.
and then give it back, or don't enforce it, or use it for a rainy day, or give it back to your spouse 10 years from now. That's the other thing I say. If your spouse is pledging to be so good to you after your divorce and to take care of everything, great, still get what's rightfully yours. And if they actually, in fact, are that great to you and actually take care of everything for the next 15 years, then hand them that check back.
Yeah, I was going to say, myth or fact, how often does that happen?
Fact? Rarely.
I know. Yeah,
Guess
I
what?
know.
I always say, if you want to write a check and give it back to your spouse, I will help you write that check. And not one time has anybody asked me to help them write a check to give it back to their spouse. There's
I
always,
bet.
well, you know what? They get involved. They have other families. They're not doing it. They get different jobs. They do this. They're not giving you things on time. So you end up needing the money. You end up needing it, or you're going to turn in retirement age and you're going to be thankful you have that money because you weren't able to save any other money during that time period.
Right, right, right. Okay, so I had mentioned in the caption that I was going to ask you about a dirty little secret, and I'm going to try and remember what my client said the other day. So we have someone whose ex had problems with addiction and blew through all of most of the marital assets. And of course, things were unfair. And then she had been a stay-at-home mom. She got back on her feet. In my mind, she's making a lot of money. Like, it's amazing, but where she lives, she's saying it's still not enough. The problem is, and so the thing is, she makes money, but there's all these expenses because of the house. But she had her credit ruined. And so in order to get more credit, she has a couple of credit cards, but there's really low amounts. So she ends up using large portion of the amount. Let's say it's like $2,000 and she spends like $1,700 a month in credit, and her credit just isn't getting better. And she said this was something she never imagined. Like, she's making a good salary, but her credit is still like really, really low because she's spending, I can't remember the term, like a large portion of the amount.
Her
What?
income to debt ratio
Right,
is bad.
right, right.
Mm-hmm.
Is that something like you guys ever deal with? Like, how can somebody rebuild their credit, especially if it's destroyed in a situation like this? I know my divorce attorney, and sorry to ask a question and then keep talking, but one more thing, my divorce attorney, as soon as the divorce was finally, he was like, or as soon as I filed, he said, you need to immediately separate everything and protect your credit. You need to protect yourself and protect your credit.
Yeah, well, let me just listen. I'm not a debt collector, but let me just point out a couple of things here, because that's a very slippery slope. If you were the stay-at-home mom and you don't have the income for your credit, you have not built up credit in just your name. You've always been a
Right.
signer or
Co-signer. Yeah.
authorized user. What happens is you go through a divorce and your spouse wants to knock you off that credit card. It's an Amex card or a Citibank or whatever card, and they've had it for years. You got tons of points, and they want to cancel you as the authorized user. That's a ding against you, right? So don't be so quick to say, get me off that credit card. Now, they can take the card from you so you don't use it, but you want to make sure you're not just dropped off the card, because that works against you. Same thing, you have 5 or 6 little cards and you don't want to have them anymore. You're starting over, clean slate. You do not want to go close your credit cards. Every time you close a credit card, it dings a negative to your credit report.
Really?
So you want to pay your balances off, but don't close them yet. And don't miss a payment. So if you're just one of those people that, you know, it comes due and you just kind of forgot about it and like, oh my God, it's a day late or 5 days late, set yourself on automatic payment for the minimum payment that will be due. So you can go on your credit cards and just mark minimum. So it could be $20, $30, $50, as long as, and then if you miss the due date, at least the minimum was paid. So there's no ding against you there. There's no negative impact to that. And then you can make the larger payment to pay it off, or however you manage your cards. But you have to manage this delicately.
Delicately.
Thank you. I'm a numbers person, right? Because everyone thinks let's close all the credit cards. But that's not a good impact. And you should get, if you're just thinking divorce now, open a credit card, because you know, you still have your family income that you're putting there, but open a credit card. You have to build credit in your name. It's really important. And the other thing is your bad credit is not going to change overnight. It could take 3 years so you have to have consistency of your payments. Just make sure those payments, as the more consistent you are making your payments on time for everything, that's what's going to build back up your credit score.
Wow. Okay. Here's another myth versus fact. I am getting divorced and I'm scared that I can't refinance our house without my ex's permission.
Okay. So first of all, you don't need anyone's permission to do anything. So I hate that word. If the agreement reads that you are buying your spouse out of the home and you have to refinance, one thing especially now, I know that judges that I've seen the cases coming through are being a little bit more lenient. They're not asking for 90 days or 60 days for you to refinance because interest rates are crazy. This is the worst time to refinance because you probably have a great interest rate. So some people are asking to their youngest child reaches high school age, or some people are asking for at least 2 years to let the interest rates readjust again. But you also need, it was always 6 months, and I think it still is 6 months, 6 months of alimony, spousal support, maintenance being deposited into your checking account on the same day every month. So every time your spouse is late, you're restarting. So you need to make sure that your agreement reads that, you know, you're refinancing fine, but also if your spouse is late on payments, you should get a reset that you need an additional 6 months to refinance. Because if you need that income to use to qualify for refinancing, the bank wants to see that, in fact, that your spouse is making those payments. So make sure that
Really good
language,
to know.
make sure that that's taken care of. And then for refinancing, again, you don't need permission. You just need an agreement that these are the guidelines for you to refinance. And also on the flip side, let's be fair, there is going to be language for your spouse that if you're late for any mortgage payments, he has a right or she has a right to have you sell the home because you can't afford it. So, and if you can't afford it, you're going to sell it anyway. But that will protect them and their credit. And they also should have a right to look at the mortgage statements, like log in and make sure you are making the payments. I know people hate to do that, but you know, in their defense, that's only fair if they're allowing you that time to refinance.
Okay, here's another, I think you're going to like this one, myth versus fact. I don't need a financial person because I have a divorce attorney, and that divorce attorney is going to handle everything.
Yeah, that's a good one. So divorce attorneys are not trained in finances, right? And if they are claimed to be, I don't think they really like being attorneys. But you also should ask them, will your final decree state that you have been advised to get financial advice? Because they read that and nobody reads that. So you can ask your attorney if it will read that. And then you could turn to your attorney and say, will that be the advice that you're giving me? Because they have you sign that because they're not giving you that advice. And so if they say yes, then you want to put their name in there that they gave you that financial advice throughout the process.
Wow. So it's much better to get a CDFA. And can you talk about what does CDFA stand for exactly, and what differentiates that from a regular financial person?
So, well, at My Divorce Solution, we're divorce financial specialists. And to become a divorce financial specialist, you have to have mediation training because we go through division scenarios. So you need to know how to negotiate a little bit, right? And then we have to be CDFAs, which are certified divorce financial analysts. And you have to have 5 years or more of training in working in the finance industry. But a certified divorce financial analyst actually gets certification in the divorce guidelines, like what to expect during a divorce. It's a little bit different. Our CDFAs and divorce that are divorce financial specialists, they do not invest your money for you. So there's a lot of financial planners who are CDFAs that will invest your money. We don't have a stake in the game. So that's the difference.
Okay, great. All right, and this is the last one that I can think of. Myth versus fact. I am not going to be able to survive financially on my own. So I have to stay. I can't do it. I don't have any certifications. I haven't ever worked. I homeschool my kids. Like I can't imagine having financial freedom.
I didn't know. That feels like a lot of pressure, and that's really scary. But let me ask you a couple of follow-up questions. Number one, what if you found out that all of the retirement money that the two of you had was marital and that you'd be receiving half of that? What if you found out that you would still be getting half of his Social Security money when you retire? What if you knew that all of the equity in the home was half of yours, even if you want to move out and be in an apartment, but you have to get half the equity of the home? What if you knew that you received an inheritance and it wasn't marital, it was all yours? What if you knew that all the debt that you have, he has to pay half also, or she has to pay half also? And what if you knew that there really was a calculation that would give you spousal support for many years? Sometimes people get it permanently, you know. So if you know, if all those answers are zero because there's nothing, I don't know how you're living now. So we have
Yeah.
a lot. Here's a fact. We have so many people that come through, they get their financial portrait and they actually literally just start to cry. And they say, oh my God, I have been controlled financially. I thought we had no money. I thought I couldn't even go to Subway. I couldn't even take my kids to a movie because it was too expensive, that we had to rent a movie and make popcorn. And now I found out I have $3 million. So what if you would live differently with your half? Although it would be different, sometimes your lifestyle will be different. You will make adjustments because you have the one income. But what if it's the difference of financial independence and your own peace of mind and living your own peaceful life? You'll make those adjustments. And if you don't want to make those adjustments, then you're doing it, then you're staying in your relationship knowingly. You're knowing that I'm going to deal with the emotional side a little differently because I kind of want to live like this financially. That's your choice.
Yeah.
It's your choice.
Okay, Catherine, I can't think of a better way to end unless there's something we forgot to say because that's so powerful.
And it's the truth. That's all truth.
Yeah.
That's truth. And I, financial abuse to me is horrible, just like emotional abuse. And I survived that. But I just want people to know that you are smart enough. You are smart enough to take a look at what you have, and you're smart enough to comprehend what your life could look like post-divorce.
Yeah.
And you're smart enough that you don't have to be controlled by somebody else.
How can people find you?
So you could go to www.mydivorcesolution, no S at the end of solution, .com. You can email us at, I think it's hello at ck11.com. I don't even know what that is. I'm not good with all the handles, but My Divorce Solution. We have Instagram. We have everything else. So you can find us there.
Yeah, and we'll put your account name in our bio so you can just go right to you.
Okay, good.
All right. Well, thank
I'm
you
not good with
so
that.
much, Catherine. Yeah.
So welcome.
This is great. This has been
Thank
so
you.
helpful.
Thank you for
And very
thank you,
optimistic too.
and thank you for talking about this. This information was not around 12 years ago, or I didn't know about it. And I think the more we could talk about it, the more the industry has a better chance of changing. And you know what? Our motto is that families deserve better, and they really do. And that's the only way we're going to change, when you have the information. So good for you for having this. And I'm always happy to come on and talk about whatever you and your listeners want to hear.
Yeah, well, we're on the same page with empowerment through education. It's like once you know your rights and once you're much more powerful.
So true.
Yeah. All right. So take care and happy early
Oh
Halloween.
yeah. Happy Halloween.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.